A Place to Call Home. What Immigrants Say Now About Life in America. Research study by Scott Biddle and Jonathan Roshkind. Introduction. It's a cliché to say that America is a nation of immigrants, but like most clichés, this one began as a statement of simple truth. Another truth is that if we're going to overhaul immigration policy, it only makes sense to listen to the people who will be most affected by it: immigrants. To craft a just and practical policy, we need to see America through the immigrants' eyes. That's true whether you favor an open door or a higher fence. You can't hope to implement sound strategies unless you understand what brings people to the United States and what they think about the nation once they get here. That's what Public Agenda hopes to accomplish with A Place to Call Home: What Immigrants Say Now About Life in America, the follow-up to our pioneering 2002 survey of immigrants, Now That I'm Here. Part 1. The Right Move. Overall, immigrants say they're quite satisfied with life in the United States, for themselves and their children. Discrimination against immigrants doesn't seem to be part of their daily lives. Although majorities say it exists, majorities also say they haven't personally experienced much of it. Right now, the biggest concern for immigrants is much the same as for native-born Americans: the economy and their own financial well-being. The economic tumult in our society may be shaping some of their perceptions and motivations. For any decision in life, whether it involves a job accepted or lost, a marriage made or ended, a school selected, or a vote cast, the evaluation comes down to one question: would you do it all over again? There may be regrets or dissatisfactions. That's part of the human condition. But if life came with a time machine or a reset button, would you make the same choice? By that standard, immigrants in America are clearly happy with their choice. More than 7 in 10, 71%, report that if they could do it all over again, they'd still come to the United States. Nor are they likely to give up and go home. Indeed, equally large numbers, 70%, say that they intend to make the United States their permanent home. That goes for their children as well. About 3/4 of immigrant parents, 74%, say it's unlikely their children will want to live in their birth country, with a strong 58% saying it's very unlikely. The reasons for this seem straightforward. Immigrants buy into American society. There's always been a fierce debate among pundits and political scientists about American exceptionalism, the idea that the United States is unique among nations. Some find this idea ennobling, others pernicious. Maybe it's no surprise, since immigrants have volunteered to build their lives here, but the people we surveyed have very little doubt. 76% say the United States is a unique country that stands for something special in the world. Only 20% disagree, saying that the United States is just another country that is no better or worse than any other. Part 2. Fitting in. Most immigrants say that they have become comfortable in the United States quickly, yet ties to their birth countries have become stronger since 2002, particularly among recent immigrants. Most of the immigrants we surveyed either were citizens already or were in the process of being naturalized. For most of them, citizenship is a practical step. So is learning to speak English, with most immigrants reporting that it is difficult to get ahead or keep a job without language skills. Immigrants clearly buy into American values, but how long does it take them to feel comfortable in American society? Although immigrants embrace what the United States stands for, this is no guarantee that they are able to fit in on a day-to-day basis. The immigrants we surveyed don't seem to feel that fitting in is a major barrier, and in fact say the process moved quickly. More than three-quarters, 77%, say that it takes fewer than 5 years to feel comfortable here and part of the community, and nearly half, 47%, say it took fewer than 2. Such easy comfort with their adopted home generally isn't being propelled by money or a common language. Just more than three-quarters, 76%, say that they came to the United States with very little money, and only 20% say they had a good amount of money to get started. Some 45% say that they came to this country not speaking any English at all, an increase of 10 points since 2002. In general, we aren't talking about people who move freely between nations, so-called citizens of the world. We're talking about people who say they're taking a big financial and cultural gamble when they emigrate to the United States. In focus groups, immigrants often said life in the United States was not what they thought it would be. In the focus groups we conducted as part of this study, one of the consistent themes was of immigrants being surprised by how much work it takes to succeed in the United States. Even with all of its advantages over their birth countries, the reality for many immigrants is that it can be difficult to live in the United States and achieve a good standard of living. There's the assumption that when you come here, you will become wealthy very fast and very easily. I have to work 12, 16 hours a day to make a living. In my birth country, they work like from 9 until 2, and then go home. A woman in the Detroit, Michigan focus group. Her sentiment is partly borne out by the survey, which also asked how often immigrants found themselves living paycheck to paycheck. Some 70% of immigrants reported doing so always, most of the time, or sometimes. When Newsweek asked the same question of the general public in January 2009, only 59% said they lived paycheck to paycheck. Among our focus groups, there was a general sense that America has no better publicist than Hollywood on this point, although movies and television often broadcast a misleading picture. All the movies are just great propaganda, like it's a lot of fun and you have a lot of money and all that. You don't think about, like, you have to pay the mortgage. You don't know. A man in New York. When I came here, the first thing I imagined was I want to live la vida loca, the great life. When I recently arrived here, I wound up in an area that was very bad, in a 2-bedroom apartment where 12 people were living. They were sharing their rent, and I said, "What have I gotten myself into?" With time, I wound up renting another apartment. I didn't imagine it would be like this. A woman in the Los Angeles focus group. Immigrants report closer ties to their birth country than they did 7 years ago. They spend more time with people from their birth country and are more likely to call home and send money. There's some suggestion, however, that when it comes to being comfortable in communities, other immigrants play a critical role. Compared with results from 2002, more immigrants say that they spend time with people from their birth country and have closer ties there. Half of the immigrants we surveyed, 51%, say they spend a lot of time with people from their birth country, a jump of 14 points from 2002. Other kinds of birth country ties have strengthened as well. One is the simple act of telephoning. The number of immigrants who tell us that they call home at least once a week rose 12 points, 40% from 28%. Granted, this may be partly because telecommunications is better and cheaper than even a few years ago. Cell phones are common. International calling is less expensive, and innovations like Skype and instant messaging make it easier to keep in touch. These strengthened ties are not merely emotional either, they're financial. While there's been no real change in the number of immigrants who say they send money to their birth country regularly, the number who say they do so once in a while increased 14 points to 44%, and the number who say they never send money fell from 55% to 37%. About 1/4 of our sample was made up of more recent immigrants, those who arrived since 2001. On the whole, their ties to the United States aren't as strong. For example, 1/3 say they will go back to live in their birth country someday. 3 in 10, 32%, say it is likely that their children will one day want to live in their birth country, compared with 18% of those here before 2001. 1/3, 34%, say that if they had to do it over, they would either stay where they were born, 26%, or pick a different country, 8%. 6 in 10, 61%, say that they spend a lot of time with people from their birth country, compared with 47% of immigrants here before 2001. More than twice as many, 66% compared with 29%, telephone home at least once a week. The recent immigrants in A Place to Call Home do seem to have different attitudes on these points than those who were recent arrivals in our 2002 study, Now That I'm Here. In other words, those who were new and still adjusting to American life in the 1990s, as opposed to the 2000s. When we compare immigrants who arrived between 2001 and 2009 with those from the 2002 study who arrived between 1990 and 2001, we find the 2001 to 2009 group are more likely to spend a lot of time with people from their birth country, 61% versus 35% in the 2002 survey. They're also more likely to call their birth country at least once a week, 66% compared with 38%. And of those who came to the United States knowing little or no English, they're more likely to say they speak their native language most of the time at home, 86% compared with 55%. At least as far as perceptions go, a majority of the immigrants we surveyed in 2009, 57%, suggest that recent immigrants have the same respect for American laws and customs as immigrants like you. About 1/3, 32%, say that recent immigrants have less respect, though only 15% of immigrants who have arrived after 2001 agree. Among our focus groups, there was a strong sense that American culture is a difficult force to resist. Many immigrants mentioned the materialism often associated with America as a drawback, although how they responded to it depended greatly on their personal beliefs. Significant numbers of immigrants came to the United States without being able to speak English, and more than half still consider their language skills fair or poor. However, they consider speaking English important for getting ahead, and most say they've taken classes to improve their ability. One of the perpetual flashpoints in the immigration debate has been over language. To what extent immigrants speak English, and to what extent the nation should accommodate those who don't. As mentioned above, a sizable number of immigrants, 45%, come to the United States with no knowledge of English. Overall, about half of them, 52%, report that they can read a book or newspaper a little or not at all. Even more of them, 63%, consider their ability to speak English to be fair or poor. This is a barrier, and immigrants know it. More than half of immigrants, 52%, say it is very hard to get a job without knowing English, although interestingly, that's a 10-point decline from 2002, and more than half, 56%, say that the United States should expect all immigrants to learn English. Immigrants are willing to take practical steps to address this. 7 in 10 of those who came to this country knowing very little or no English at all say that they've taken classes to improve their English, a jump of 23% from 2002. Nearly three-quarters, 74% of immigrants overall, say that it is more important for schools to teach immigrant children English as quickly as possible than it is to teach them other subjects in their native language. Some 88% of those with school-age children consider their child's English to be excellent or good. Despite this, English isn't the primary language in many immigrant homes. Nearly two-thirds, 64%, of those who came to the United States speaking little or no English say that they mostly speak their native language at home, a 25-point increase from 2002. There's also a significant difference based on when immigrants came here and how much money they have. 90% of those who still don't speak English well came to the country with very little money. Recent immigrants, since 2001, are more likely to have arrived already knowing how to speak English, 30% compared with 22%, but the recent immigrants who did not are also much more likely to speak their native language in the home, 86% compared with 55%. These immigrants are also more doubtful about their skills, with 75% reporting that their English is fair or poor, compared with 58% of immigrants who have been here a while.